Now, before we start the business of the day, I wanted to let you know I had a wonderful time in the concert hall earlier today. Several councillors and myself attended the Perth and Kinross School's Creative Day of Dance in the concert hall. We saw young children from 23 schools from Perth and Kinross performing on stage 25 dances to a full audience, having the time of their lives. And I wanted to publicly congratulate the teachers and in particular the children who worked extremely hard throughout the year learning all the dances. The standard was first class, and I should know. And they were a credit to the schools, their parents and this council. I would like to ask John Fyffe, especially in this last year, Sheena Devlin and Caroline Shires, if they would please pass on our congratulations to them all for a job well done. I'm sure you would all agree with me. Now, welcome and apologies. We've got, can I just before that, just to remind councillors and officers to use the microphones and request that those attending the meeting ensure that all mobile phones and other communication devices are on silent mode. I would also like to remind those attending the meeting that it will be recorded and be available for you on YouTube via the council's website following the meeting. Are there any apologies for today's meeting?
Provost, thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Purvis.
Thank you. Are there any declarations in interest in respect of, beg your pardon?
No, my apologies, Provost. We've also got apologies from Councillor Pova.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of items on the business today? Councillor Parrott.
Convener, thank you. Non-financial interest in paper 10 as a council-appointed director of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
Thank you. Any others? Sorry. Okay, thank you.
A declaration of interest in the same paper as a member of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
I have the same declaration of interest in paper 10.
The same one, thank you. Any others? No? Good. Right, can we agree the minute of the special meeting of the Council of 22nd of November 2017? And can we agree the minute of the Council meeting of the 20th of December 2017? Okay. In terms of Standing Order 29, any challenges to the accuracy of a minute required to be submitted in writing to the Head of Democratic Services at least 2 working days prior to the meeting at which the minute is being considered. I'm sure you're all aware of that, but better to mention it. Item 4, minutes of meetings of committees from 22nd of November. Can we agree to note the minutes of the Common Good Fund committees of the 20th of December 2017? Now, in terms of Standing Order 29, any challenges to the accuracy of a minute required to be submitted, I'm going to repeat it again, in writing the Head of Democratic Services at least 2 working days. Now, Local Review Body, 5th of December 2017.
Move for noting, Provost.
Thank you.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you. Planning and Development Management Committee, 6th of December.
Move for noting, Provost.
Thank you. Seconder.
Move for second.
Sorry, which one? Councillor Braun. Licensing Committee, 7th of December. Thank you.
And I'll second, Provost.
Thank you. Local Review Body.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Licensing Committee, 11th of January. Councillor Brock.
And second, Provost.
Councillor James. Planning and Development Management Committee, 17th of January.
Happy to move, Provost.
Councillor Braun.
Seconded, Provost, thank you.
Councillor McCall. Housing and Communities Committee.
Move for noting, Provost, with a correction with reference to Article 26 of the minute valedictories, the first sentence to be removed.
Thank you. And seconding?
Happy to second, Provost.
Councillor Braun. Lifelong Learning Committee, 24th of January.
Move for noting, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Shires. Councillor, seconder? Environment and Infrastructure Committee, 31st of January.
Move for noting, Provost.
Councillor Stewart.
No, you can't.
Yeah. Councillor Roberts. Audit Committee, 31st of January. Local Review Body, 6th of February.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you. Strategic Policy and Resources Committee, 7th of February.
Move for noting, Provost.
I was there and was happy to second, Provost.
The Scrutiny Committee, 7th of February.
Happy to move for noting, Provost, with the correction to Article 77 of the minute. The date should read the 12th of December 2017.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McCall, was it? Yeah, McCall, yeah. Thank you. So the Article 26 was the minute of the valedictories, the first sentence to be removed? Yep.
Yes, pick those up.
And you picked those up. That's fine. Item 5, the Community Planning Partnership Update. Can I ask, are there any questions of John Fyffe, Senior Depute Chief Executive? Councillor Barrett.
Convener, thank you. My question relates to page 180, paragraph 3.1, in terms of the research being undertaken by What Works Scotland. Can I ask how that might be reported back to Council in due course? Thank you.
I'd like to say, hopefully for the last time, thank you for your question, Councillor Barrett. Yes, I mean, the report is still on schedule to be produced, and it should be in the hands of officers by the end of this month. So one would assume it will come back to the next council meeting after that.
Councillor McKeon. Councillor McKeon.
So did I get the honour of asking John his very last question then? Community empowerment and local democracy is something I'm very proud to be involved in. Eastern Perthshire Action Partnership is currently voting as we speak in the participatory budgeting. What I'd like to know is how many extra, because some of these projects will get voted for and get their funding, and some projects won't get their funding from the community's choices. How many extra projects would be funded if we say added an extra £600,000 to the budget for this process?
I'm not sure I'm in a position to actually answer that question, because it depends on the nature, size and scope of the project, and whether or not the project is voted upon through participatory budgeting means by members of the community. But obviously if there was additional money, then one would assume there'd be additional projects could be considered.
Any other questions? No. Oh, I've just got a note here. In future, community planning partnership updates will be submitted to the Housing and Communities Committee. Item 6, Treasury Activity and Compliance Report. Can I ask Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to comment?
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, Councillors. This report advises Council of Treasury activity undertaken for the quarter ended 31st of December 2017. Section 2 provides commentary on the economic background during the quarter, the most significant issue being the first increase since 2007 in the Bank of England base rate from 0.25% to 0.5% in November. However, this had no immediate impact upon the Council's own borrowing costs. 2 new fixed rate loans totalling £10 million were taken out in December, in line with the requirements of the approved capital programme. Overall, the Council's long-term debt increased from £322 million to £332 million, but the average interest rate on the debt reduced, generating savings and interest equivalent to over £100,000 per annum. Investment activity was undertaken in accordance with the Council's daily cash flow requirements. During the quarter, short-term surpluses were invested over a longer period to generate higher returns, but the total amount invested reduced from £44.8 million to £40.3 million by the 31st of December. There were no breaches in compliance with approved policy during the quarter, and the Council's plans remain affordable, prudent and sustainable over the medium term. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Are there any questions? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. It's on page 18234. The comments regarding the 3.6 million were required for cash flow requirements over the Christmas close down period. Can you explain why we would need that?
Thank you, Councillor McCall, for your question. Yes, we pay salaries early over the Christmas period, so it's mostly to do with salary payments over that period.
Any other questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, just to ask, on page 183, section 4.2, it refers to Link Asset Services, previously known as Capita Asset Services. What I wanted to ask, is the Treasury function still dependent on any services provided by Capita? And just as a matter of prudence, because of profit warnings and the precipitous fall in the share price, is any other areas of Council dependent on services provided by Capita?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson, for your question. We do have other services which are provided by Capita, including some of our payment services, but we've had no indication of any difficulties in respect of the delivery of those services.
Could I ask the broader question across the Council? Capita isn't Carillion, it would appear, but still there have been problems quite clearly. And I think, you know, it's just a precautionary question, so that we don't face risks on that front.
My mic on. Councillor Lyle, move the report.
Thank you, Provost. This report provides a summary of the Treasury management activity for the quarter up to the 31st of December 17. During the quarter, there was further new borrowing of £10 million to support the delivery of our capital budget. This was borrowed at an average rate of 2.17% for the term of 29.5 years. There was also short-term borrowing over the Christmas period close down. There was a reduced level of investment undertaken in accordance with the Council's new cash flow requirements. There were no breaches in compliance with the Council's Treasury management policy. The returns achieved on investments increased in line with the increase in the base bank rate in November 17, and I would ask the Council to note this report.
Are there any comments of the report? I didn't see your hand. Sorry, Councillor Barrett.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up, Provost. I was intending to second it.
Sorry.
That's okay. Provost, I'd say happy to second the paper and note the savings of over £100,000 per year arising from reduced borrowing interest rates set out in paragraph 3.3. Section 4 again confirms that there were no breaches in compliance of the Council's Treasury management policy, ensuring the security of investment whilst maximising the return on our deposits, and the report demonstrates the Council's continued strength in Treasury management, and therefore happy to second, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Now, is there any comments? Apologies, it's been a long, long day already. Any comments on the report? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. Just to echo some of Councillor Donaldson's remarks, that I do hope that the Council can perhaps consider if we do have potential risk in the future that we might need to put some contingency plans in place. I'm sure the Head of Finance is more than capable and probably already has that underway, but I just would feel confident that, more comfortable if I could perhaps get that reassurance from him after the meeting.
Thank you. I'm sure that's been noted. No more comments. Okay, item 7. Head of Finance again, Stuart.
Thank you, Provost. This report sets out the Council's proposed Treasury strategy over the period of the current medium-term financial plan. It seeks approval for the annual investment strategy for 2018-19. Section 2 details the current Treasury position. Based upon delivering the approved capital programme and refinancing maturing debt, the Council will require to borrow an additional £282 million over the next 5 years. Sections 3 and 4 consider the risks around and the proposed approach to financing this borrowing. The general expectation is that interest rates will remain relatively low over the next 12 months, then gradually increase, as shown in Appendices 1 and 2 of the report. However, there remains potential risks to borrowing costs related to the performance of both the UK and global economy. It is proposed that the Council continue to manage its borrowing primarily through the Public Works Loans Board, as the Treasury portfolio requires. Accelerated borrowing may, however, need to be considered if interest rates begin to rise more significantly than anticipated. Sections 5 and 6 set out the proposed investment strategy for 2018-19. Appendix 3 details the suggested permitted investments for the Council, and Appendix 4 details the property investment strategy. It is not proposed to make any changes to the monetary limits for investments, and both investment activity and approved counterparties will be reported to Council through the quarterly Treasury reports. Security and liquidity of the sums invested remain the primary objective, and the permitted investments are considered to carry a low level of risk. So the strategy is based on the return of capital rather than return on capital. The report also outlines recent changes to the SITFA Prudential Code and Treasury Management Code of Practice, which are required to be implemented in 2018-19. As Council has agreed to defer consideration of the capital budget until June, it is proposed that these changes and revised prudential indicators are considered at that time. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you, Stuart. Is there any questions? Councillor Platt.
Thank you, Provost. I refer to paragraph 8.3 on page 210. I think it's greatly to the credit of our finance officers that Perth and Kinross is one of the top 10% in terms of overall borrowing rates over the last few years. But can I ask, in an era of interest rates possibly rising, albeit slowly, are we in a position to borrow ahead earlier than we might otherwise have done against our requirements to lock in lower interest rates than we might otherwise get? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park, for your question. Yes, we can advance borrow in terms of locking ourselves into an advantageous interest rate position. The downside of that is our investments would increase, so there's obviously the risk associated with investments, and the returns on investments are commensurately relatively low, but we can increase our borrowing if interest rates begin to move in the wrong direction.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, can I turn to page 206, section 5.3, and it's just to get some clarity here so we know where we are going forward. It states, it is proposed that the permitted investments are further expanded to include other negotiable instruments, including bonds and floating rate notes, but it does exclude specifically corporate bonds. Yet I turn to page 221, and there's a list of permissible investments, and that does seem to include floating rate notes. So there's that point. The second point is by expanding the range to include bonds, what exactly type of bonds do you refer to?
Apologies, Councillor Donaldson, I didn't quite catch the first point. Was it a cross-referencing issue in the report?
On page 221,
yep,
it sets out the permitted investments
Yes.
However, on the section here under 5.3, it states it is proposed that the permitted investments are further expanded to include other negotiable instruments, including bonds and floating rate notes.
I think that's the use of language. We were seeking approval to include floating rate notes and bonds as part of the permitted investments. To take the second point of... Sorry?
Yeah, on you go.
Okay. Yeah. To address your second question, I think we'd be using bonds perhaps as a last option. It's just a range of financial instruments which are available to the council, but corporate bonds are more associated with investment, and we wouldn't be seeking to do that.
Okay, can I just ask as a follow-up on that, going forward, obviously it wouldn't be the case just now, but when interest rates do return to, I suppose, what some of us would consider more normal levels, that you would even consider the use of government gilts and even of index linkers, and especially with the rise in inflation, that may well be a strategy to follow going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I would concur. We'd look at our investment options and our investment portfolio accordingly, dependent on the interest rate environment. So we'd look at these options if the situation required.
No more questions? Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost. On page 217, we have the outlook for interest rates, and we've got two tables. They seem to give quite varying forecasts between the two tables. I was wondering if you could give me the difference in monetary terms to the council from the best looking forecast to the worst looking forecast, what the annual difference would be.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. I don't have that information to hand. I'm happy to have it sourced for you. If I was able to accurately predict interest rates, perhaps I'd have a different job. It is quite a challenge.
You do have the forecast, though. I was asking on these forecasts, not on what was happening.
We can certainly calculate the extremes, if you like, what the difference would be for you. Yes, we can work out a figure for you. But I don't have it to hand, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dugan.
Yes, thank you, Provost. It's a very welcome report that we've got before us. If we look at the changes that have happened across the organisation, it's great to see the continuity of stringent and productive financial management. On page 230, we see on Appendix 4 the commercial investment property review with the gross rent by account. Can I ask what steps the council are taking to review rents, both with a view to making sure the council is receiving the appropriate and best return on those investments, but also where appropriate to encourage economic development in key areas of our economy?
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Dugan. We constantly review our rents in terms of both the sites that we hold and the investors that we wish to attract. We do a lot of market testing, but also, as you say, Councillor Dugan, we do offer packages to get specific businesses into the area. So the estates team are constantly reviewing these rents.
Okay, thank you. No more questions? Councillor Lyle, can you move the report?
Thank you, Provost. This report details the proposed Treasury strategy and activities for the years 18-19 to 22-23, as well as the investment strategy for the year 18-19. Relating to Councillor Parrott's question, the report details the forecast for interest rates, which are expected to rise gradually over the coming years. However, the economic and political uncertainties around the world have an effect on this forecast. This council will need to continue re-evaluate its borrowing strategy in the light of actual circumstances over this period. The investment strategy details the anticipated investment activities and the proposed permitted investments for the council. These include proposed addition of further investment instruments, which will continue to reflect the use of our low-risk contemporaries. The property investment strategy includes the evaluation and potential use of new and innovative funding arrangements which may become available. The report also outlines the revised Prudential Code which has been published by SIPFA for implementation on 1819. This will be undertaken in conjunction with the Council considering a new capital budget at our Council meeting on the 20th of June. I ask the Council to note this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. The strategy outlined in this report is designed to ensure that the Council achieves the best possible rates on its borrowings and investments and at the minimum level of risk in light of the prevailing and forecast market conditions. Security and liquidity of sums invested remain the primary objective over yield, and the investment strategy covers all matters required by the investment regulations. Also lists the proposed permitted investments and the strategy for undertaking those investments. The proposed permitted investments carry a low level of risk, and I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? No, move the report. Right, item 8, Perth and Kinross Corporate Plan. Can I invite Bernadette Malone, Chief Executive, to introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Provost. Councillors, this is the 6th corporate plan that's been agreed by Perth and Kinross Council. The first was, or considered I should say, the first was agreed in 1997. And really the purpose of the corporate plan is threefold. First of all, it sets a clear purpose and direction for the organisation. It is a blueprint for action, so that all constituent parts of the organisation are clear about what they need to do, what they need to contribute to, and what it is expected that they will achieve. The second is it sets out clearly our strategic priorities. And those are the strategic priorities, the commitment that we are making to the communities of Perth and Kinross. And importantly, because most of our work is undertaken in partnership with a range of bodies, it is consistent with the strategic priorities, the strategic objectives in the community plan. And, you know, what do these strategic objectives mean in practice? Well, the strategic objectives, if you agree those today, will mean that we are committing, for example, that every child, every young person, regardless of their circumstance, regardless of where they live in Perth and Kinross, we commit to ensuring that they will be able to fulfil their potential. We're also committing to ensuring that people can live healthy, independent and active lives for as long as possible. And we can only undertake that in conjunction with our colleagues in health and the third sector organisations. We're also giving a strong commitment to growing and diversifying our economy. So that's about attracting investment, it's about attracting jobs, and ensuring that we can fund expanded infrastructure. But we're also, through this document, committing to ensuring that we work together with many different bodies to enhance the quality of life for people right across Perth and Kinross. Because that's our job, that's what we're about. Improving people's lives is what we're committing to, and we have a very successful track record in doing so. The third aspect of this corporate plan is that it helps to foster a strong and corporate culture, because staff can see clearly what the priorities of the organisation are, how they fit in, how they can contribute and be part of the success of this organisation. So importantly, it sets out the future direction, and because we are accepting, hopefully, the strategic objectives, which are the same as those that we have worked to deliver over the last 5 years. This brings continuity and stability in the organisation at a time of challenge and change. And the achievements in respect of the corporate plan will be reported to Council as part of our annual performance report for the Council, but also through our community plan annual report. And I would say in conclusion, Provost, that our approach to strategic planning generally, and this is an important document linking the community plan, medium-term financial plan and the BMIPs, but our approach to strategic planning has been recognised in successive reports by external bodies as a real strength, and most recently in the report, the annual report of the external auditors to the Council in October, where we were commended for the effectiveness of our approach in this area. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bernadette. Any questions on the report? No? Well, you've got all polite. Oh, Councillor Dugan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Provost. A very interesting and important report. Can I ask a question on Appendix 1, which is particularly enlightening, and the chart on page 4, which details the changing workforce profile. Sorry, Provost. The changing workforce profile, I would suggest all councillors in the chamber should familiarise themselves with. Can I ask, Provost, in terms of building ambition and developing talent, which is the title of that appendix, how will we achieve that given the recent reductions that have been made to the council's training budget in the last budget?
I was happy to answer the question, but if you would... Right, okay. Thank you, Councillor Dugan.
My enthusiasm, Provost.
Any other? Yes, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost. It's a very impressive document, but I feel it's very aspirational. And some of the points, as in 245, we will create vibrant centres in Perth City and our towns, including quality retail attractive streetscapes, a range of food outlets, independent shops, selected high street stores and vibrant pop-up shopping opportunities. I think that's a fantastic aspiration. I'd like some detail, if we have any, of how it would be achieved. And also, because it affects my ward a little bit, is local community groups will be established and engaged in addressing litter and environmental issues, including fly tipping, and action plans to prevent and manage invasive non-native plant species will be designed and developed. I've been asking for this. It'd be interesting to know what our plans for these two areas are. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps if I answer the first question and then pass on over to the Executive Director of Housing and Environment to answer the second question, if I may. With regard to the first question, this is deliberately an aspirational document, setting out our ambition, as you recognise, Councillor Lang. We recognise and have done for many, many years in this council that we serve 150,000 people across Perth and Kinross. And those people will have aspirations for themselves, their families, for their community. And we respect that, and we seek to ensure that their aspirations are met in terms of the responsibilities that the council have. The rural towns are very important in terms of high quality of life that we aspire to for our citizens and our communities, but also the vibrancy of our communities and our economy. And how will we deliver that? Setting out, and if you agree today, that this is an important priority, guides our work, guides the financial decisions that we make. And in the budget 2 weeks ago, the Council did agree investment in areas in our rural communities in Perth and Kinross, particularly our rural towns, and working with the business community, retailers, high street operators and communities to consider how we can take forward initiatives to support and diversify local economies. And so as part of that community empowerment approach and the financial commitment we've made then as a council, then clearly exploring the needs and opportunities within our rural areas will be an important aspect of delivering this. But it is highly aspirational, as you have said, but it's our responsibility to try and work to deliver that.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Oh, sorry, Barbara.
Okay. Thank you. In relation to your second question then, Councillor Lang, it has always been, sort of the council's, sort of very good reputation in working with community groups, sort of particularly in terms of Bloom committees, which you will all be aware of. And this is about an expansion of that, because we are also aware that, you know, there is a growing demand for communities, you know, sort of we work already in terms of litter pickups and all that kind of thing. But it's about making, you know, sort of communities much more self-resilient, you know, sort of in being able to do that, and we just want to progress that. We already have a very small transformation project, which is about communities taking ownership of land, and we're looking to bring forward a second, bigger transformation project that will actually allow us to support our communities in doing more for themselves, particularly in things like environmental issues and litter. In terms of the invasive species, yes, it is aspirational, you know, sort of, but I think that this is recognising that, you know, sort of it is an increasing problem, not just within Perth and Kinross, but nationally, and that, you know, sort of we are recognising what communities are saying to us, but also recognising that the community green space team are very keen to see what they can do within the resources that we have, and working with landowners to be able to deal with that.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there any more comments? No. Councillor Lyle, to move the report.
Thank you, Provost. This report provides information to councillors on the latest developments with the Community Planning Partnership. Also, it includes matters relating to the Community Plan, local action partnerships, and the ongoing review of local decision making. This is carried out by What Works Scotland, and several elected members, including myself, have already contributed to this, and we've had focus groups in the council. Provost, I'm happy to move the report, and this is the report on paper 8.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett.
Provost, I'm again happy to second, I think, the fact that nothing very much happened on endangered species and invasive species in the previous council term doesn't mean that that situation has to persist or go on for another 5 years, and I certainly hope that it won't. Provost, the corporate plan is the roadmap which sets out the direction of travel for the council to achieve our ambitions for Perth and Kinross. It takes the aspirations of our communities expressed through documents such as the Community Plan, the Fairness Commission report, Fairer Futures, and the Tay Cities deal, and distills this into a clear set of commitments which will drive our priorities for the next 4 years, with a strong focus on growing the economy, community empowerment and engagement, and the delivery of better outcomes for those experiencing challenges in their lives in Perth and Kinross. And I'm happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Provost. On the first point from Barbara, I have found that the Environment Service are extremely helpful when we are doing organising litter picks. They will organise special collections of rubbish, and they will provide bags and litter picking sticks. So I find that has been really helpful in the past, and I'm sure will continue in the future. And for my ward, I'm extremely grateful to hear that the administration is going to finance the eradication of Himalayan balsam in Strathtay ward. That's fantastic news.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. I have to tell you that I do get some pride in reading out the 5 key priorities of this council, and I've been a councillor for a wee while now, and these priorities have not changed. They've remained constant, and we're still working to achieve them, but they're great objectives. But if I could just give one word of caution, I personally am really proud of the quality of life we have here in Perth and Kinross, but there is a feeling in many parts now, especially in places like Scone and in Kinross, that the amount of development we've been forced to accept could seriously affect the quality of lives of the people, the residents who currently live there. And the same will apply in West Perth as well, I could imagine. So it's with a note of caution that I do welcome this report, but I think we should try and watch how we handle development in the future and not allow it to ruin the fantastic quality of life that we and all our residents enjoy currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any more comments? No, just agree the report. Item 9, the Corporate Workforce Plan for 1821. Can I ask Jim Valentine, Depute Chief Executive, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, the paper before you sets out the Council's approach to workforce planning to ensure that we have a suitable labour force to be able to provide the services we require in a rapidly changing environment. Ensuring that our people are supported is critical if we are to continue with our strong culture of improvement and maintain our position as a high-performing council. In the face of many challenges, we have continued to transform the services which we provide to provide the best outcomes possible to the people of Perth and Kinross. The corporate workforce plan not only sets our approach going forward, it also highlights the specific areas which we are targeting to ensure that we have a robust and resilient workforce. Many of the areas which we have highlighted in terms of recruitment and retention difficulties are areas where there is a national as well as a local problem. We have set out what actions are underway to deal with these specific issues within a Perth and Kinross context. With continuing pressure on public finances and a raft of emerging legislation, the future will continue to present challenges, but we are convinced that the corporate workforce plan ensures that we have the necessary measures in place to ensure we have a workforce which is agile, adaptable and best prepared to deliver on the Council's priorities. Karen Donaldson and I are happy to take any questions, and I know that there's at least one.
I'm taking the first question. I'm taking it.
You want to take it? Councillor Dugan, do you have your hand up?
Provost, I did have my hand up. And thank you for your now trademark patience with this chamber. No, it's now that people have caught up with me and item 9, for my money, the main event on today's agenda, I would draw people's attention quite seriously to Appendix 1 and quite seriously to page 4, the changing demographic of our workforce. It's quite easy to slip into abstract, particularly or when we're making decisions as councillors, particularly at budget time, to forget exactly what lies behind these decisions sometimes, and the changing demographic of our workforce is particularly important. But I wanted to establish if there's any contradiction or impediment to our ambition for building ambition and developing talent, as the title of Appendix 1 suggests, from the recent substantial percentage cuts in the training budget that was sustained under the administration's motion just last week, Provost. Thank you.
I think Bernadette's going to answer this.
Thank you very much. Councillors will be aware that over several years I have stressed to Council that capacity across the Council was an increasing challenge in terms of an 11%, as it says in the report, reduction in the workforce, but increased expectations, new legislation, new policies, new responsibilities placed on staff. So capacity, discretionary effort, staff not taking flexi, annual leave are all features of our work in Perth and Kinross Council. And I am very conscious about the pressure that staff are under within this organisation. So how are we then supporting staff in terms of building ambition? As you said, there's been changes in terms of the funding to support staff. There is no doubt that continuous personal development is an important entitlement, it could be argued. So how are we compensating for that? Well, over the years, we have increased investment in organisational development within the Council. Last year, last year's budget, the previous year, £1 million was included in the budget, not only for transformation, but also for organisational development. That investment has gone into supporting professional development, supporting personal development, because building a resilient workforce helps improve productivity, but also investing in opportunities for people to change careers, because we know that in some areas that there are supply issues, but there's also areas of expansion like early years and childcare. We've invested in the well-being of our staff, so support for staff in terms of their well-being, and the Angel Share and the use of the Angel Share, what was introduced a number of years ago, has been very effective in that regard. So there is a lot of investment and work that we're doing. However, I recognise that with a reduced workforce, increased pressure, there are real capacity issues within the organisation. And so therefore, it is my intention to have discussions with elected members going forward about the consequences of some of the decisions we're making, new legislation, policies, etc., so that together we're clear about how we implement the priorities and how we continue to support staff in quite challenging times.
Thank you, Bernadette. Is there any other comments? Questions, sorry.
Thank you very much indeed, Provost. I too share the Chief Executive's concern about capacity in the future, although this excellent report should give us all a great deal of confidence that we should be ready for anything that gets flung at us. But I do have a concern that we are conscious of the duty of care we all have for our staff. It's very laudable that they don't take their holidays, that they work extra time. I was conscious in the bad old days when I worked for a living and I did a lot of my emailing at 7 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, that I would get responses at that time. And I'm very concerned that staff are not, in effect, overdoing it. We do have a duty of care. And do we have a mechanism in place to ensure that we get the best out of people without either them overdoing it or even us corporately taking advantage of their good nature?
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yes, there is a lot of the, as the Chief Executive says, of discretionary effort and people working long hours, etc. But line managers do monitor staff. We do get reports on the hours that people are working, and we do all try to look after one another. Through our organisational development team as well, we try to build a lot of resilience, both in terms of mental and physical resilience. So we do what we need to do as a caring employer to try and ensure that staff are adequately treated. I think, though, the Chief Executive makes a good point in terms of expectation. With a shrinking number of staff, your expectations may not always be upheld.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. It's very helpful. I note on the appendix that the permanent workforce...
Sorry.
Is that better, Willie? Can you hear me? Thank you. That the turnover, the permanent workforce turnover has gone up quite alarmingly. I mean, I think 6.4% in the first place is quite high, and now it's up at 9.2%. So I'd be interested in understanding what strategy is being developed to address that and what your target turnover would be. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think the first thing to comment on is that the turnover is high, and that's probably because we have been trying to encourage people to exit the organisation. So in part, the permanent turnover is high because there are a number of voluntary leavers who've accepted voluntary severance from the organisation. We've also transferred a number of staff to other bodies, such as Tayside Contracts last year and Culture Perth and Kinross in years prior to that. So the turnover figure reflects these strategic decisions that the Council has made as well. I think turnover is most relevant when you look at it within a particular occupational group, and that's where we work very closely with service managers at looking at particular occupational areas to make sure that the turnover is not unacceptably high, and we look at putting in measures in order to address that. It's about understanding why people leave the organisation and taking all reasonable steps to ensure that we retain the workforce with the skills that we require in the future. And in terms of target, we don't actually have a target for turnover, but we do know that from our benchmarking research that within the public sector, specifically within local government, 10% is not out of the ordinary.
Thank you. Councillor Rebick.
Thank you, Provost. 1.1 of the paper says workforce planning is getting the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time, which is absolutely right. In lieu of that, I'd just like to ask a question around the Learn to Teach programme, which encourages and supports council staff with a degree into teaching. My layman's understanding is that the first cohort's now becoming teachers. They're actually in the school teaching. It seems to me to be a really positive thing. And I wonder whether somebody who would know better than me would confirm that indeed that this is positive news. And do we think that the Learn to Teach early years will also be as equally as positive in the light of the fact that early years transformation will be a crucial thing for the Council going forward?
Okay, thank you. Sheena, would you want to do that?
I'm very pleased to be able to answer that question, Councillor Ribbick, so thank you very much. The Learn to Teach programme was introduced back in, well, we did all the prep work in 2015 and the first cohort kicked off in 2016, and we had 12 of our employees undertake that programme, and they are currently now undertaking their probationary year in our schools and will also be part of a ring-fenced recruitment process. So we expect to have 12 very well qualified additional teachers that were formerly employees of Perth and Kinross working in our schools from August of this year. We had a further cohort of 7 employees start last year, and they are currently, they will be commencing their probationary year in August 18. And we have a further 4 who started in January. And it was that model of retraining existing employees that was actually the inspiration for our own in-house model of learning to learn in early years, which is for people who we will see the opportunities of the expansion of early learning and childcare across Perth and Kinross as a really attractive career option. And so we've got, I think, 13 people, including 2 men, undertaking that first cohort of learning to learn in early years. In addition to all of that, if I may, if you'll indulge me, just to give you a bit more information, we also, for the first time last August, had 9 places on a Masters of Education in partnership with Perth College UHI. Now, they weren't for employees, but they were for ring-fenced for residents of Perth and Kinross, and particularly residents in Highland and Eastern Perthshire, where, of course, we have the most acute difficulties in attracting teachers to our schools there. And we expect to have more places on that course this year. We've also got 3 people who started in January at Dundee University on the condensed programme, which is a combination of undertaking your postgraduate qualification in one of the STEM subjects, so science, technologies, engineering and mathematics, and your probationary year, and doing that over a condensed period of time. So we've now got 3 people who have opted to change career to become teachers working in that area as well. And over and above that, we're also in our 4th year of our men in childcare course, which specifically targets bringing men into our childcare workforce. So whilst the numbers might seem relatively small, I think over a period of time what we'll see is a number of people coming in to work in schools in Perth and Kinross who live in the area that will hopefully help with some of the recruitment and retention difficulties.
Thank you, Sheena.
Thank you for that positive answer. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Frost. I'm always really amazed at the dedication of our staff in Perth and Kinross, and it's been evident since the last 10 days when the results of the terrible weather we had in throughout Perth and Kinross, the way that the teams actually worked together to try and get people out of their houses and back onto the roads. Can I say, when I read through the report, the one theme that ran through it quite strongly was a word called Brexit, and saying that the problems that's going to cause us in the coming future in a very competitive jobs market, actually attracting the skills and the type of people who are wanting to work within the organisation. And even, I noticed there's a page dedicated to the HGV drivers that we employ, and the fact that many of them are over the age of 50. Could I ask what we're actually going to do to try and address the difficulties that Brexit could cause us as an organisation in securing the staff that we'll actually need?
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. In terms of dealing with the problems that Brexit perhaps presents in terms of employability, these are national problems, and a lot of these issues are being looked at national level. But we are also conscious that in areas such as HGV drivers, we need to be dealing with that now. So we're looking at how we make these kind of posts more attractive to people, how we get the people involved that might not have thought of certain opportunities as careers in the past. So we are constantly refreshing through this document how we try and recruit people, and more importantly, where we are trying to recruit people from.
Happy with that? Okay. Councillor Band.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Revick asked the question that I was originally going to ask, and a very comprehensive reply from Ms Devlin, which I thank her for as well. Is there not a similar scheme available to employees who go to work for the Environment Service, that should they prove to be first-class employees and conscientious employees, that they can be offered training as heavy goods drivers?
Thank you, Councillor Band, for that question. Yes, that's the programme that we work, sort of so that we have employees who start at sort of basic grade and entrance into the service, and as they work up, or if they demonstrate good, strong skills, then, sort of we would then be encouraging them and putting them through the HGV, sort of training. And that retains quite a lot of staff within the organisation. However, as Jim just says, and as the report points out, then, sort of salaries for HGV drivers can be significantly higher for the private sector. But what we do offer is much more localised driving, and sort of in a pension scheme, sort of, and it's those kinds of things that we would be promoting. I'm also struck by the fact that 98% of our HGV drivers are male, and I think that, sort of what I would be looking for is, sort of an approach that would actually encourage more women into that, and more women locally as well. And I was discussing with the head of service the other day, I would pick up with Karen Donaldson as well, about using the 1 or 2 women who are currently HGV drivers in a promotional campaign as well, to encourage other women to come into that.
Any more? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. You've partly answered some of the questions I was going to ask, and that was really about gender balance within the workforce. Although you've given us some gender indicators at the different sectors of the workforce, the overall gender balance within the council in terms of the workforce isn't quite so clear. So it'd be useful to know what that is, if somebody can tell me that. And also how that workforce is balanced, because there seems to be areas where it's predominantly female or predominantly male. And I'm encouraged to hear that there will be some planning to try and encourage some women into predominantly male workforce areas. But I think it needs more than just an aspiration for targeted pieces. I'd like to know overall what is the aim for the gender balance throughout the entire workforce. And a supplementary question to that is, what is the gender pay gap that currently exists within the council, and how do you intend that to be addressed? Thank you.
I'll take the last question first of all. It's a very simple answer. The gender pay gap in Perth and Kinross Council is 0.4% in favour of women. So I think we plan to have a 0% pay gap, but I think being 0.4 is really a very good position to be in, and that compares favourably with many other local authorities. And we're collating that information in accordance with the guidance that's set out by the Equalities Commission. In relation to occupational segregation, or gender balance within the organisation, first of all, we are predominantly a female workforce. Off the top of my head, I think it's roughly 71-72% female and the balance male. Again, that's the overall. I think it's much more relevant to look at the gender balance within individual occupational groups, and I think that's much more telling, because that's where you can actually identify specific actions to address that. We have a number of programmes. You've heard about the Men in Childcare and some other initiatives to encourage the opposite sex into into an occupation that's dominated by the other sex. So we do that, but I think that there's a much more powerful underlying programme of work that's required in there, and that's the council working with schools, because it's about starting to work with primary education in primary schools to start to influence attitudes about what people can do when they grow up. We work with our education colleagues in visits to schools, and that continues into secondary, and looking at our modern apprenticeship programmes as well. So there are a range of measures in place, and I think we need to step those up, because I think it will take quite some time to change societal attitudes towards occupational segregation, but we are looking at that in particular localised areas and taking steps to address that.
You want to do the next one? Okay. You happy with that? That's lovely. Okay, so no more comments, questions? No. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Provost. It's very appropriate that today's council meeting considers a new corporate workforce plan alongside the new corporate plan which this council has just approved. Provost, we are reliant on the talent and efforts of our workforce to deliver the priorities identified within the corporate plan. Also, we need to continually plan and reshape our organisation to ensure it's fit for purpose, to face the changes, the challenges, and indeed the opportunities that lie ahead. There is a strong cultural dimension to the new corporate workforce plan. It is people, not structures, who develop this high performance. And I wish to remind you that Perth and Kinross Council is nationally recognised as a high-performing council. Our ongoing commitment to maintaining a collective focus on the connection between leadership, employee engagement, and culture helps to define our employment offer and our reputation as an employer of choice. The new corporate workforce plan identifies key workforce planning challenges facing the council over the next 3 years. This is with reference in particular to occupational groups and in the context of the wider influences at a local, regional and national level. The plan describes our focus on culture and our approach to attract, retain and develop talent, promote healthy working lives and to deliver fair work for all. Over the past 8 years, the composition and size of our workforce has changed as the council has rationalised its services, implemented new service delivery models and transformed services. This has been achieved by prioritising early intervention and prevention and embracing all digital opportunities. Our corporate workforce plan describes the workforce development and culture change which has enabled this journey to take place. Equally, this will provide a solid foundation to build upon in future years. Our future workforce requirements will reflect council priorities and the changing nature of how services will be delivered. We will place particular emphasis on working together with our communities. Recruiting and retaining people in the right skills with the right attitudes is fundamental to this council's success. This plan sets out what we intend to do to ensure that we have the workforce we need for the future. Priorities and measurable outcomes have been developed under a number of themes which reinforce our commitment to our people, with significant ongoing investment in providing opportunities for them to learn, to innovate and to grow. These principles underpin our approach to workforce planning and the Council's transformation agenda. Provost, like all plans, the corporate workforce plan will be kept under review to ensure that we take account of the emerging factors locally, regionally and nationally. We will provide and we will update the Council on the progress in implementing our plan at the annual workforce report each December. Provost, I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, a week might be a long time in politics, but I don't think it's really long enough time for Councillor Duggan to be in a strong position to lecture this administration on council staff terms and conditions. There may have been difficult decisions to make over training budgets, but certainly this administration sought to preserve and to enhance the actual physical work environment of staff in the buildings that they work from, and didn't accept swinging cuts in our property service maintenance budgets, to the like of which that his party was prepared to do so. Provost, I wanted to also make mention of the fantastic work that the Men in Childcare project has done in this council to achieve greater gender balance in a workforce dominated predominantly by women. but it also, we've succeeded in increasing the numbers of males employed in the childcare workforce, providing greater numbers of positive role models to our children and young people, which I think is extremely valuable. The corporate workforce plan sets out how the Council's workforce management plan sits with and ties in with the transformation strategy and medium-term financial plan, aligning our workforce to financial challenges, new ways of working, public sector reform and demographic changes. The strategy summarises the changes in workforce size, wage bill, age profile and turnover rates, and the change in shape to address Council and national priorities moving forward. And I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Deputy Provost Wilson.
Thanks, Provost. I very much commend the report. It's good there's been a lot of questions on the report because I think they've been well set out and well answered. And if we can't spend time on discussing our staff, then I think we beat. I think this, the Chief Executive regularly reminds us that the biggest asset that we've got, and we need to certainly treat them with both respect and care. I like the report because it's comprehensive but quite short. It's well laid out. For once, I've no criticisms about the colours or the typeface or anything like that. But I also like the fact that it sets out what the service group does, what the challenges are, and how we're already tackling some of these challenges and how we might tackle them in the future. And I think that's a very constructive way to deal with it. But we don't exist in a world of just the Council. First of all, we've got huge external influences. The private sector's one, for a start. And secondly, national policy. Councillor Robertson's already referred to the Brexit situation. It's one that we've got, unfortunately, in my opinion, to live with for the next few years at least. But we also have big influences on staff recruitment at national level. Teachers, particular, and childcare staff in the future will be two very main areas. And whilst we ourselves have a big programme of transformation, innovation and change, so do governments, both at UK level and at Scottish level. And if I have a plea at all, it's that the almost indigestible rate of change that sometimes emanates from both parliaments, but I can think particularly of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government, imposes extra burdens, extra responsibilities, extra responses on our staff. We did at one point, I think, Provost, work out what percentage of time staff were spent on either audits initiated from the Scottish Government of one sort or another, or inquiries, or new initiatives and responses to them. And it was quite a high percentage. Now, if staff are carrying out that type of work, then something else has got to give. Something else has got to be placed in a queue waiting to be done. And finally, Provost, I think we have a role as councillors ourselves, because we create demand in our staff by casework, by discussion, by asking for information. And I think as we go on in the next 4 or 5 years, we need to be conscious of that and make sure that we try to target our inquiries as best we can, use technology wherever it's possible, and even I'm capable of training in the use of technology. Provost, that may come as a shock to some folk in the room. But I think that we need to regard our interface with the staff very cautiously and carefully in relation to the demands that we make on them, and that we try our very best to use the best, make the very best use of scarce resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor Donaldson.
First of all, can I thank the Chief Executive, the Deputy Chief Executive, and also Sheena Devlin for their very useful contributions. Also, we've heard from many of the leading lights in this administration, but let's be clear about one thing here. The direction of travel that's set out in this paper is rather different from what was decided at full council nearly 2 weeks ago. Quite clearly, the administration councils, not just Conservatives, but Independents, Liberal Democrats and Labour, voted to cut 25,000 out of the training budget in education services, voted to cut the training budget in environmental services by 15% on a recurring basis, and most incredible of all, it's not a vast sum, it's 10,000 per annum recurring, but voted to cut the training budget in information technology by over 30%. So how on earth does that square? And Councillor Rebick made the comment with the words at the start of this paper, workforce planning is getting the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. The decision of this administration has been to cut training. How does that square with our learn, innovate, grow philosophy? It's right across the board, and it is not the right direction of travel for this council. And it matters for two reasons. One, it matters for our staff in terms of pushing them up and giving them additional skills and aptitudes, but it also matters crucially in terms of productivity. And we hear so much about productivity at both a national level, either the UK or Scotland, and where we do lag significantly behind our European colleagues, in particular, for instance, even France. But it matters here on the council to improve efficiency, to improve our performance, to remain, and that's the key thing. We are one of the better, higher performing councils in Scotland, and we've got to stay that way. We don't let this administration start us on a slippery slope to a less efficient council and how it functions.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. I thought we all recognised what a good document this was, but I think we also recognise it's an evolving document. We need to change as we go along. And I have a suggestion, which I hope will find everybody in the chamber can agree. I'm looking at page 282, and which refers to healthy working lives, which are key to keeping people going. And I notice there's an omission there, as there is no mention anywhere of active travel, which I think is generally recognised as a free and easy way for us all to become fitter. And all the things here, our well-being, our resilience, our mental health and our work-life balance would all benefit from this. And a little bit would go a long way. Promise, I have a few suggestions. I think a large poster in the lift saying lifts are for losers would be good. And I would encourage us all, when we go up for our cake after the meeting, to use the stairs and have an extra slice. There are other things we could do. If people were to cycle and were to walk in the course of their working life, it would make a tremendous difference. And if you think I'm making this up, you only have to look at Councillor Robertson and I, living proof of the benefits to the elderly of cycling. We should all be doing this, Boris. And I hope, although some people think I'm being light-hearted here, it's very serious. Those of us that cycle will live another 10 years, longer than those of you who drive about all the time. I think it would be a cheap way of making sure that we got the very best of our staff if active travel was encouraged. And I think it's something that we could slip in somewhere on this wheel on page 282 in the future, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'm glad you mentioned bikes. Councillor James.
Thank you, Provost. It's nice to get a lesson from a party that the general public didn't.
Are you using the mic?
I've got it on, Provost. Sorry, I'll bend forward and speak into it. I said it was really nice just now to get a lecture in running the council from the group that the general public didn't want to run this council. Great report, which I take 100%, but the only thing I have not an issue with, but I'd like the officers to take heed of, is that we seem fixated in here with either gender or age, and I don't think it comes down to gender or age. I think we should be recruiting the right person for the job, regardless. If that means that we're 100% women, then so be it, or 100% men, but we should have the right people for the job. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Forbes.
I would just like to reassure Councillor Simpson that an active travel plan is indeed coming to E&I in due course.
Any other comment? Yes. Nope. Thank you. Item 10, transforming the cultural offer in Perth and Kinross. Can I invite Fiona Robertson to give it? Can I invite Fiona Robertson to give the presentation?
Hello, councillors. Can you hear me? Good. That's great. PowerPoint is right. Okay. Can everyone got sight of the screen? That's great. Councillors, we've talked to you about City Hall before. When we last talked to you about it in detail, which was August last year, you asked us to bring back an update report. Before I just take you through the presentation, because we wanted to show you where we're up to with the project, I appreciate it may look as if nothing very much has happened except some barriers going up around the building, but there has been a lot of work ongoing. It is still work in progress, but we want to just show you where we are with that. But before I start, can I just draw your attention to and apologise for a typo in the report which leaves a bit of ambiguity about the cost of the project at paragraph 1.1 and 2.6. Just to be absolutely clear, the total cost of the building project is 20 million. The cost of the public realm works, which will surround City Hall, is 2.8 million. So apologies for any confusion that the report may have caused. Just to say a bit about, most of the slides I've got to show you are images rather than words, but just to say a bit about project benefits. The report makes reference to the fact that the creative economy in the UK is now the fastest growing sector in the UK economy as a whole. The creative economy, I think there's sometimes some unhelpful assumptions about it, that it's marginal or a bit of a luxury. It's not marginal, it's a significant sector. It accounts for about 5% of total jobs. By way of comparison, manufacturing industry around about 9% of jobs, finance, insurance, those kinds of things, about 3.7% of jobs. So it is a big hitter, and it's growing. So this is absolutely a project which is about celebrating our fantastic culture and heritage and strengthening the cultural tourism economy of the area, and fundamentally it's about growing the economy. That's what it's about. Now, hopefully you will remember this image which we showed you last August. This was the architect's Mechanu's outline concept design, which they submitted to the international design competition, which we ran for City Hall. And you can see there, you're looking at the building from the north side, so and from above, and you can see that there's a proposal there to create a new main entrance to the building, about 3/4 of the way down on the north facade. And that will also, as I'll show you in a minute, form a new city venal, which will run all the way through the building. And you'll have seen this running on a loop whilst you've been coming in and settling yourselves in for the meeting, have seen this image as well. And this was Mechanu's concept to create a box right in the heart of the building in which very fragile or special exhibits could be shown. And I'll show you in a minute how all that is shaping up since, or how it has shaped up since August last year. I'm not going to dwell on any of these, but just to kind of show the process, really. So what the architects and the exhibition designers, who are a company called Metaphor, do when they start work on a project like this is they really take the building apart and start to deconstruct it. You can see here the different floors. This is the ground floor. So you can see the lesser city hall at the top of the slide there, which is proposed for conversion into the cafe and social space of the building. Just adjacent to that, you can see that new Venel, which will run right the way through the heart of the building, and we hope will be a really exciting gathering space and will link visually and historically as well to the city Venels that surround the hall. And then you can see the box in the middle there. So the architects just start to look at every square metre of the building and think about what do we need to use these spaces for? How do we make the most of the building to deliver what we want to deliver? And many of you, I know, will remember the building when it was previously in use as a performance space, a civic space, a gathering space at the heart of Perth. And one of the reasons why Mechanoo ended up being the successful architects is that their proposals are very much about working with the grain of what's there. Using and recycling the architectural features and making the most of those. And we felt, those of us who were on the judging panel, felt that that was very important because it respected the original purpose of the building, but there was also a hard-edged thing there about cost as well, because Mechanoo's design was the most affordable at the moment, and costs will go up and down. We've got a long way to go with this project, but at the moment, our latest cost plan shows us as just under the £20 million budget, and Stephen Crawford and I intend to keep it that way, barring anything unforeseen. These are some very early sketches by the exhibition designers who are working with the architects, and their job is to bring the exhibitions and displays to life. And these are very, very early sketches that they did when we first brought them on board, thinking about the space and how the space could be brought to life. And these are some images just to show you how the architects working with the exhibition designers start to plan the building in 3D. So you can see there, I realise it's all white and probably looks a bit abstract, but you can see there a view from the first floor, the mezzanine floor, and how that box that I showed you earlier on will look in the space. This probably looks very flat and boring, and apologies for that, but this, again, it's to give you a sense of the work in progress. As I say, there's a lot more going on than just putting some barriers up around the building. This is what the architects and the exhibition designers start to develop in terms of thinking about the narrative, the story that we want to showcase in City Hall. As you know, it's about Perth's ancient roots. It's why Perth is historically so significant to how Scotland was shaped, and beyond that, how Scotland contributed to the shaping of Europe and made global impact as well. There's been a lot of discussion, particularly with the absolutely fantastic curatorial teams at Culture Perth and Kinross. I have to pay, huge respect to them, because their knowledge of the museum collections that we're going to be showcasing, and not just the collections that they look after on our behalf, but other archaeological sites and other collections and museums right across the country. There's been a lot of discussion about how do we actually narrow all of this down into a really compelling exhibition. And 3 of the themes that have emerged are around the story of the land, the amazing environment of Perth and Kinross, and where Perth sits within that, the stories of stone, which I'll come back to in a moment, and water, crucially the Tay, but also the waterways that link Perth and Kinross and communities right across the area. This is a similar treatment, just starting to think about the Stone of Destiny, and just to pause on that for a moment. We are not making any assumptions, and it would be disrespectful to make any assumptions about whether or not the Stone of Destiny will come to Perth, but it is absolutely integral to the story that we're trying to tell, absolutely integral, and that was an in-principle decision that we made very early on, that we would develop the exhibition proposals with the Stone of Destiny and its place in the story at their heart. And here, sorry, that you probably can't see that terribly well, but starting to look at visuals, Moot Hill, the place where coronations took place originally, right up there in the top left-hand corner of the slide. Apologies, it's very small, but that is the first visual image that we have. It shows Alexander III's coronation, and it's the first visual image where the Stone of Destiny makes its appearance. Just very briefly, I'm conscious of time, these are examples of treatments in other museums which the exhibition designers and we are looking at to give us inspiration. Augmented reality, virtual reality is a big thing now in museums of the 21st century, and they really can help to bring to life historical periods, particularly complex stories for a variety of audiences. This is a new museum which has opened showing a very important Roman site just in the city of London, and we're looking at and we'll be budgeting for, within reason, these kinds of treatments in City Hall. And finally, just back to some of the practicalities, this is very detailed work in progress, but again, this is starting to plan, and this is the ground floor, how we will showcase major objects and starting to think about the layout in City Hall. So down there in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the Carpow lugboat, which is a major object in the collection, which we really do want to showcase. Other significant objects like Pictish carvings, all of these things we're starting to map out and determine how and where they're going to be displayed. So that's about it from me. Happy to take questions on the report, Provost. We do have a long way to go. We will be going for planning consent later on this year, summer, early autumn. We won't reach a final design until about a year from now. There is a project board, and you approved the setup of that project board in August last year, which is signing off every design stage, so there's good governance around this. It is a major project for us. It is not without risk, but we did want to give you some assurance and some background to how we're getting on with it.
Thank you, Fiona. That's a very full presentation. Is there any questions of the Councillor Drysdale?
Thank you, Provost. As City Centre Ward Councillor, or one of them, I am supportive of the project and have been throughout the deliberations. However, I am concerned about the financial and other risks that you've alluded to in your presentation, Fiona. Clearly, you clarified at the start about the figures, and we're talking about 22 million in total, including the public realm additions that you spoke of. 10 million of that is committed by this council. The balance of funding is anticipated to come from the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Tay Cities deal, neither of which are certain at this point in time. And you spoke also about additional or potential additional costs that you're trying to keep on top of. I'm concerned that at a time where we're having to make increasingly difficult decisions about cutting services to make ends meet, that we are exposed to financial risk as a council in the event that costs do increase despite our best efforts. Can you give any further assurances on that? In particular, central to the whole project, as you said, is the Stone of Scone, the Stone of Destiny, and yeah, okay, thank you. I'm concerned that that's another risk which, if it doesn't materialise, will drive our coach and horses through the potential visitor figures that you've quoted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson. Oh, sorry, Fiona, did you want to answer? I beg your pardon. I'll go back to sleep. Okay, thank you, Fiona. It's Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Provost. Spookily, Fiona's answered one of my questions before I've asked it, which is very impressive with the visitor numbers. But I think we can all agree with Councillor Dreiser that it should be described as the stone of Scone with destiny in brackets, I think, Provost, so we know exactly what stone we're talking about. There's also a choice, of course, as we know, so if they won't give us one in Edinburgh, there's plenty more to choose from, I can assure you. To be serious, I can't understand the problem with giving us it back, seeing it was pinched from here. And I wonder if there's any more pressure we can give as a council, because this is not a new story. The first meeting I ever attended when I was first elected 15 odd years ago was an attempt to get it back, and they wouldn't let us have it then. So it's been going on for quite a long time. And we've never been given what I would describe as a plausible excuse why we can't have our stone back. Now, we don't want to rock the boat and upset people, but we live in a democracy as far as I know, and it shouldn't be a question of sucking up to people in high places to get our stone back. There should be another way of going about it, and I just wonder if there's any more we can do to try and do that. And secondary to that, I hope that although this is about Perth and about the City Hall, the whole of Perthshire will be included in this. We'd have some sort of trails to do with the stone, both out to Scone Palace. Now that I've retired from the post office, I can tell you that Scone Post Office played a crucial role when the stone was stolen in the 50s, because the note to say that it had been pinched was pinned to the post office door. So there are all sorts of interesting things, or bars of interesting things where we could make it into a trail. You could even cycle round it from here. There's a pattern emerging here, probably. But I think to stray back, to be serious just for a moment, it's our stone and we'd quite like it back. And I think if we're unsuccessful in this application, we need to find a better way of bringing pressure to bear. Because the first question I always ask a councillor when people come to me wanting things done and I say they can't do it, who says we can't have it back? And I think that would be my question.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. It's always good. Sorry, Fiona, back to you. There you go. Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Robertson. Okay. Councillor McDade.
Oh, there we go. Right, thank you, Provost. My question very quickly is, if we are successful in getting the Stone of Scone to Perth, is the plan to charge for its admission into that part of the building to view it, as obviously it's currently charged for in Edinburgh Castle as part of the ticket admission there? And if we do plan to charge, what additional revenue would that be likely to bring in?
Thank you for the question. The Council's position is that there will not be a charge to view the Stone of Destiny if it comes to Perth. Current admission charges at Edinburgh Castle, I think I'm right in saying, range between just over £13 and up to about £18. But the Council's position is that there will not be a charge to view the Stone of Destiny or other related exhibits, Councillor McDade. There will be other parts of the building, for example, temporary exhibitions, major touring exhibitions for which we would expect to charge, and the business case and the business plan assumptions factor that in.
Okay, thank you. Fiona, Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. It's just a wee reminder, as Fiona said in her introduction, we saw the constitution of the board, the governance board, back in August. We're asked to note it, though, with this paper, and we can see from the summary that Councillor Lyle's on the board and CPK are on the board. I wonder if Fiona might update Council on who else constitutes that board ahead of us noting it. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Dugan, thank you for the question. Yes, there is equal representation from Culture Perth and Kinross and the Council on the board. We also have an independent advisor, Sir Mark Jones, who was previously Director of National Museums of Scotland.
So no more questions? No. Councillor Lyle, can I ask you to move the report?
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Fiona for her comprehensive presentation and answers to the questions. I did note it was a bit remiss of the architect in not putting a bike rack up the side of the building, but hopefully we'll have that for the final draft. The paper before you is an update on the current position we are with the Perth City Hall. The Council has agreed a goal of developing Perth as a major cultural centre, and this will build on not only the Council's own significant collections, but will attract other internationally renowned cultural attractions and exhibitions to Perth. At the heart of this ambition is the development of the Perth City Hall as a new museum attraction. This will not only provide a display area for the cultural icon that we wish to relocate here, but also give the space to be able to accommodate major touring exhibitions which our current facilities can't provide. The completed facilities will provide a new experience, drawing in at least 160,000 visitors from across the world to the city, and giving an alternative place to go when the weather dictates, as it occasionally does in this player. Thank you. I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. Delighted to second the Leader of the Council with this report and re-emphasise my support for the £30 million investment in cultural facilities in Perth and Kinross, and keeping Perth on Scotland's cultural map, offering cultural and arts facilities and celebrating heritage with attractions to invest for growth, to complement the Victoria and Albert Museum in Dundee, to increase visitor numbers and length of stays and themselves in Perth, dwell times, and enhance Perth's status as a visitor attraction of national significance. The Stone of Destiny is central to the telling of our story of ancient roots, if not to the delivery of ourselves as a national attraction, and that is something that we as a council must continue to commit to. We must also continue to demonstrate cross-party and all-party support to lead any national or public consultation exercise that's required to help deliver the stone to Scone and make sure that the long-term, it's not Scone, Perth, Lewis, and deliver the long-term home for the stone that must be here in Perth. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments? Oh, can I send Robertson?
Thank you, Provost. There's a museum in Bolzano in Italy, which I don't know if anybody's ever visited before, but it's actually a major attraction. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people go to this museum in Bolzano. And the reason they go there is they go to see a man called Uzzi. Uzzi was 5,000 years old, and he was found in a glacier, Copper Age man, and he was perfectly mummified, and he's preserved in the museum, and that attracts thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. That's why I think it's so important that the Stone of Scone actually comes back to Perth and Kinross. And I think to make this whole thing stack up, we need a big hook, a thing that actually inspires people and makes people excited. And I know museums and exhibitions are all very well and it's great fun, but it doesn't really have that hook. We really need the Stone of Scone back.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor McDade.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm a strong believer that public art and artefacts should be on public display wherever possible, so I'm very pleased that the City Hall is going to be renovated fully for this purpose. And I do welcome the investment in the City Hall, not just because it will be a major attraction for Perth, but it will provide an extra major tourist attraction for Perth and Kinross, and the wider Perthshire area on the A9 corridor will be badly in need of additional attractions to retain tourism once the A9 is dualled, and the effect that will have. So I welcome very much the additional tourist attraction to bring people and keep them in Perth and Kinross, keep them spending their money here locally in the economy.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. No more comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 11, review of the standing orders and scheme of administration. So can Gillian Taylor to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor, this paper makes recommendations on revisions to the Council's standing orders and scheme of administration following the review of political decision-making structures which we agreed at the end of December last year. These are documents which we are required to have legally, and I accept that that's perhaps reflected in the language of the documents, and I think that the Head of Legal and Governance and I would prefer that it was otherwise, but we do our best within the constraints of the legal requirements. Given the postponement of last week's Council meeting, if these documents are approved today, then the effective date will be the 7th of March. Provost, with your indulgence, I might try and preempt a question that I think might come in relation to paragraph 2.4, when we talk about the requirement of standing orders in relation to petitions. And I'm happy to advise Council that given the snow days last week, I was able to actually complete a draft petitions procedure for the Council, and I would hope that I'll be able to share that with colleagues and elected members very shortly, and we can get that live. Provost, I'm happy to answer any questions on either the standing orders or the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Are there any questions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. Two quick, one's a point and one's a question. The point is on page 47 of the standing orders. I do welcome of the scheme of administration. Sorry, I do welcome very much the simplification of the scheme of administration. However, I think there is an error in 14.6 where it says North Ayrshire Integration Joint Board. I'm assuming that's supposed to say Perth and Kinross. And then my question is around in the proposals in the paper, page 5 of the paper, it's point 2.2, the recommendation to change the order for council meetings. And I'm just wondering, the recommendation for this, did that come out of the focus groups the Head of Democratic Services undertook, or did it come from somewhere else, such as the surveys, that recommendation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. No more questions. Councillor Lyle.
A chance to answer the question.
Sorry?
Do you want me to answer Councillor McDade's question? You needing your coffee?
I'm having a hard day today.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor McDade. It's not something that came directly out of the focus groups or out of the surveys. You might recall when I was doing the preparatory work around the review of the scheme and the review of standing orders, what we said is that we would look elsewhere as well to other council standing orders, to other council schemes, and what we recognised that was actually in the vast majority of other councils, the order of business actually was in favour of dealing with the substantive business, and then the motions were at the end of the agenda or at the end of the order of business. However, there is always the proviso, as is set out in the report, if the Council feels that the subject matter of the motion is of sufficient importance, then that can be elevated on the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Gillian, for your presentation. The Council's decision-making processes and structures need to be underpinned by robust standing orders and a clear scheme of administration, setting out where decisions can be made and who makes these decisions. Provost, I am happy to move the Council approve the revised standing orders of the scheme of administration contained in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett.
Formally, Provost.
Any comments on the report? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. The paragraph 2.2, the proposal in paragraph 2.2 of this paper gives me concern, the one related to the demotion of motions to the end of the business. The reason it gives me that concern is that it will hinder two things that I think are important to the functioning of this council. One, it will reduce the ability of smaller political groupings to get things onto the agenda, to get them debated. Secondly, I worry that it will hinder the ability of this council to respond to community concern on given issues that maybe aren't on the main agenda, but are of interest to the wider community. My worry would be motions coming at the end means they don't get a fair airing, everyone's wanting to be away to get their cake. Maybe our press gallery has left by the end of the meeting, and therefore things don't get a good airing. So therefore I'd like to propose an amendment. The amendment would accept the majority of this paper but strike out the proposal 2.2 and leave our standing orders related to motions as they are today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you second her?
I'm happy to second that the amendment, Provost.
Do you not respond to that now? Is there any comments? No comments on it. Councillor Lyle?
No, no comment. Thank you.
No.
Thank you, Provost. We're dealing with item 11 on the agenda, which is the review of standing orders and scheme of administration. You have a motion by Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Barrett, that you approve the recommendations and the revised standing orders and scheme of administration. You have an amendment by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor McDade, that the scheme of administration be approved, but in relation to standing orders, the order of business, of council business, remain with this current status quo, which is that the motions would come earlier in the agenda and not at the end of the agenda. In terms of standing orders, the vote is by roll call, so when I call your name, can you please indicate whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Band.
Amendment.
Councillor Barnacle.
Amendment.
Councillor Barrett. Councillor Braun. Councillor Brock. Councillor Coates. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Harry Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Dugan.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Ling.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCool.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott?
Amendment.
Councillor Rebeck?
Amendment.
Councillor Reid?
Motion.
Councillor Robertson? Councillor Sarwar? Amendment. Councillor Shires?
Amendment.
Councillor Simpson?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Waters?
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson?
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson?
Motion.
For the motion, 19 for the amendment. The amendment is therefore carried.
What was this?
18 for the motion, 19 for the amendment.
Okay. Do we take any more comments?
No, that's it.
Right. Item 12 on the agenda today is the review of the scheme of establishment for community councils in Perth and Kinross. So it's Gillian Taylor, Head of Democratic again.
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, this report seeks to give me authority to undertake a review of the arrangements for community councils across Perth and Kinross. These arrangements were last comprehensively reviewed in 2011, and as we seek to work differently with all of our communities in the future, I think it's important that we support all of the groups in our communities to fulfil their role in that future. To that end, the review will involve elected members and community councils, and it is hoped that it will complement the review work being undertaken by What Works Scotland on behalf of the Community Planning Partnership, and also help to inform how the Council engages with the joint Scottish Government COSLA review of local governance, which was announced in December 2017. I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Thank you, Provost.
Any questions? Councillor Duggan.
Thank you, Provost. I'm referring to Appendix 1, which details the Community Council boundary anomalies. It's with reference to, obviously, Ward 11. Could I have a wee bit of clarity on what the comments mean, both in terms of Letham and Tulloch Community Councils, both of which obviously are in abeyance, but I still don't know what these comments are indicating. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Duggan, for the question. I think the comments, we're obviously very conscious that in some areas there have always been anomalies and that the community council areas have not matched ward boundaries, and there are further areas which have those anomalies following the new boundaries which were introduced last year. The comment in there is it will be a matter for us to discuss with the community councils where they are and with elected members as to whether you wish to match community council areas with ward boundaries or whether you're happy to leave the community council boundaries as they were. So that's I hope that's clarification.
So this is purely a reconciliation then with the reduction from 4 members to 3 in Perth City North?
Yes, it's just to do with the boundaries.
Okay. Any other, Councillor Barnacle?
In relation to Ward 8, I'm actually conscious that there are people in the south of the Kinross CC area who I think may wish to move the boundary to be included in Cleash and Blair Adam. What facility exists within the ward and within the fact that we've got these 2 community councils within Ward 8, what facility exists to facilitate that change if the community so wish?
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Barnacle, for the question. The scheme of establishment of community councils sets out how many community councils there will be and what those areas will be. So if there is a feeling in that area that the areas of those 2 community councils should be changed, if that's what the community would like to happen, then it's within the gift of this council. We bring recommendations forward to the council, and it's within the gift of the council to change the scheme to reflect that.
Okay. Councillor Ling.
It's more of a comment. It's on page 303 and it's Medvin and District. I
just to say I agree that to change this would be far too large a task.
Is there a question, or are you just going to leave that to the comments?
Well, I just only want to point out the typo, really, Provost, that the poor people of Red Gorton will be Red Gorton rather than Red Gorton.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other questions? No. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Provost. I'm sure that you and all councillors recognise the role that community councils play in our communities, and it is this council's duty to ensure that we support them. Accordingly, we have to ensure that the support we provide meets their needs, and the proposed review will provide the opportunity for a broad discussion around current issues. I am happy to move that the Council approve the recommendations set out in the report attached.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Formally.
Any comments? No. Thank you. Read the report. Yeah. Item 13, Scottish Government's consultation paper on electoral reform. And Jim Valentine, can you?
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, this paper seeks approval for a response on the Scottish Government consultation paper on electoral reform. The report acknowledges that the consultation paper is seeking comments from a broad range of stakeholders in the electoral process. And whilst we are recommending a response on behalf of the Council, we recognise that political parties and individuals will wish to submit their own views. The Council may be aware that at its meeting on the 23rd of February, COSLA also approved a comprehensive response on behalf of member local authorities. Gillian and I are happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, no questions. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you again, Provost. The current Scottish Government consultation paper on electoral reform seeks views on a wide range of subjects and topics in relation to the running of local government and the Scottish Parliament elections. Recognising that individuals, political parties and election practitioners and many other organisations will provide views on this consultation paper, I would move that the consultation paper be noted, but it is for each political party and each individual to respond to the Scottish Government therein. Happy to move the paper on that.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Again, formally, Provost.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Dugan.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just following on from the sentiment of the Leader of the Council, I just wanted to point out that the paper helpfully reminds members, not just of the Council, but officers and of the public, that the consultation ends on the 12th of March, and I wanted to draw people's attention to the opportunity that the consultation affords us into addressing the issues of the lists of names on ballot papers, which many of us will realise has an inbuilt bias to those towards the top of the alphabet. And where I'm certain that Councillor Anderson and perhaps Councillor Ahern might see nothing wrong in that, many of the rest of us do, and it gives some options, one of which is reverse alphabet, you know the other way around? Which simply just reverses the bias, Provost. So really what we're looking for is randomisation, and clearly anybody who's given it any thought realises there's no political gain for any political party. This is purely an issue relative to the candidates' names, and when a process has got an inbuilt bias, it is by definition a substandard process.
That's a comment you just made. Comment?
Yeah, just interested. Any other? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. It's quite noticeable that this consultation exercise doesn't actually ask the question that it should ask, and that is, do we want to see a change in the electoral system for the election to the Scottish Parliament? We all as councillors get elected in multi-member wards, and I actually enjoy working with my multi-party colleagues in Kinrossshire in a joint way, whereas in the Scottish Parliament it's a first past the post and then the discredited list system. And knowing a number of list MSPs, I know it's a very difficult task to take. So I'm really disappointed that this consultation exercise hasn't looked at the electoral system for electing members to the Scottish Parliament, and I hope they do soon and look at a multi-member ward type of election system.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I agree with the report. Item 14, appointments of committees, partner organisations, outside bodies and working groups. Can I have your agreement that the updated list of appointments be circulated today? You've got them, yep. Councillor Colin Stewart, following on from these appointments, Council is asked to agree to continue the payment of a senior councillor's allowance to Councillor Colin Stewart, but at a reduced level of £19,834. Agreed?
No, not agreed. Not in the least bit agreed. Thank you, Provost. I'm a little bit surprised, I have to say, and disappointed to see this. I'm not sure on what basis this can be remotely justified. Councillor Stewart, who incidentally has done a fine job as convener over the last 10 months, will no longer be the convener of a service committee. And crucially, under this administration, he won't be the deputy leader, as is my understanding. He won't be the deputy leader of the administration. He might be the deputy leader of the Conservative group, and he might feature on a number of other committees, but that does not, by my reckoning, and I very much hope those of us in this chamber who aren't in the Conservative Party, does not, by my reckoning, constitute he is entitled to a senior councillor's allowance, or, moreover, any part thereof. It's extremely important that we recognise the hard work that's done by conveners on the council, Provost, the additional time constraints and responsibilities that accrue to people in that position, and that's why they get an increased remuneration under the terms and conditions for councillors. So, Councillor Stewart, I wish him every success in his new appointments, but he is not a convener of a service committee, and therefore he's not entitled to anything extra. And moreover, Provost, in case it's escaped anybody's attention, buried in the appendix you'll see that Councillor Stewart is to take up his position on NHS Tayside, a post which will be rewarding him with over £8,000 a year on top of his councillor's salary. So I would suggest that maybe councillors in this chamber might want to think very seriously about whether or not he's afforded any portion of a senior councillor's allowance on top of all of that. Because I remember at the beginning of the last administration there was some changes to senior councillors' allowance, which my Liberal Democrat colleagues were incandescent, I seem to recall, about. And I would also remind members of the administration who are not members of the Conservative Party, this would be a super opportunity to demonstrate that they're not led by the nose in these matters. So I'm not content to go with this, and neither is the SNP group, Provost, so I'm very happy to move that the additional allowance for Councillor Stewart is not awarded.
Thank you. Have you a seconder there? Councillor Legg.
I'm happy to second, Provost, and I'm also disappointed that the Leader of the Council did not approach us beforehand to discuss this matter and only tried to put it through on the day.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry. Deputy Provost.
Provost, these matters are always dealt with, I hope, with a degree of delicacy and always sometimes with a degree of difficulty. I would suggest, if there is not a feeling of unanimity in the room, that we have a very short recess for 2 minutes.
Yep, I would agree to that, yep. Recess for a couple of minutes, 3 minutes. Make it 10, make it 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Right, councillors, at least you had 5 minutes break for yourselves. I propose to take this item off the agenda. Is that agreed? Thank you.
Sorry, not the whole item, Provost.
No, that particular one. But don't give me worries, I feel. It was that item. Item 15, timetables of meetings. Can I ask the Council to agree to the change in committee dates in March 2018 as set out? I think you've all got a piece of paper with you. Have you?
Yes. Well, it's fine.
You were slow that time, Grant.
Dealt with that, Provost. Don't confuse yourself. I know. I'll just tuck that away.
So they're all agreed now.
The dates are set out on the agenda. Provost, we've dealt with that, Provost. Provost, Councillor Lane's looking for clarity on the dates.
Sorry, 15.3 was not agreed. It was 15.1 and 15.2 are agreed.
Yes.
But not 3 yet struck.
We haven't. One and 15.2 are agreed.
You're agreed.
15.1 and 15.2 are agreed.
Yeah.
15.3 is no longer required.
That's right. So we're on item 16 now.
Yes.
Right. Appointments of subcommittees of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee. The Council is asked to agree that following the announcement of the Chief Executive will be retiring in early July 2018. Councillors Lyle, Barrett, Shires, Dugan and Lang be appointed to the Appointments Subcommittee. You all in agreement? Okay. Now we have a couple of valedictories. Get your hankies out. This one is for Joyce Somerville, who's been a very hard-working committee officer. Joy has been a committee officer with Perth and Kinross Council for 17 years, since 2001. Unfortunately, Joy is not able to be here today, but I wanted to mark her retirement from the Council at the end of March. She has worked with a number of different elected members and senior officers throughout this period and has supported many different committees, partnerships and decision-making bodies. We will miss her knowledge and experience, but wish her and her husband, Terry, well in their retirement. Do you all agree with that? Yeah. Now we come to John Fyffe. We all must go, we'll all go now. I first met John when he was my headmaster.
We did that.
At my old school, Blairgowrie High. We joined Perth and Kinross Council in the same year, 2007. John has been an Executive Director in Perth and Kinross Council for over 10 years, where as Executive Director of Education, Children's and Cultural Services, he has successfully led sustainable service and corporate initiatives to the benefit of children and families. As Senior Depute Chief Executive, he has a strategic lead responsibility for equalities, cultural and community planning, and public sector reform, where he is lead officer on the Community Planning Partnerships Fairness Commission. He is also leading on the Council's bid to become the UK City of Culture 2021, while working closely with the Council's leadership, the Provost and all elected members and key strategic partners to ensure that the Council progresses, develops and achieves its strategic priorities as expressed in the community and corporate plans. John served as President of Association of Directors of Education in Scotland between 2013 and 2015 and co-wrote its 2020 Vision Strategy paper, which has been adopted by national and local agencies. He has sat on numerous boards and working groups and is currently a member of Scotland's Attainment Challenge Advisory Board, the Ministerial Working Group on Child Sexual Exploitation, and co-chairs the National GIRFIC Implementation Group. He is also one of these people who is easy to work with. Team working is a real strength, and he is passionate about young people. His most important legacy, however, is the difference his passion and leadership has made to children's lives, and for that we will be eternally grateful. We will miss John's cheery face about the place and his endless stories about Dundee United. I hope you're not listening to this one, Eric. John, we wish you and your family all the very best for the future. And hopefully you will all be able to come to the presentation to John at 4 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of March. And then later, we're all off to the nightclub. So, Old Age Pensioners Nightclub. So, John, can you get off your hungers?
Excuse me for getting on my knees.
My goodness. Provost Bernadette, many thanks for your kind words. I must admit, I was wondering who you were talking about earlier on, and possibly a few of you may be asking the same questions. It's been 11 years since I was appointed Executive Director of Education and Children's Services in 2007. I've had the benefit of, and I really mean this, I've had the benefit of attending over 70 council meetings, gaining much wisdom over this period. It reads well, you know. However, I've always been given support, sometimes after significant levels of challenge from your good selves and your predecessors, certainly on some of the papers that I've presented to you over many years. Now, these include finance for investment in Bertha Park, which is a catalyst for the Western Edge growth area there, investment in nurture groups for young people who have got attachment issues, Perth City Campus, where we've actually brought together 4 secondary schools and the types of courses that are available, making them more effective and giving a greater choice for young people. Skills for work courses, meeting the needs of young people as well, and links with Perth College in delivering these. We've brought forward papers on additional children's social workers, simply because of the demand and the caseload that social work has and still do. We've invested in projects such as Change is a Must, which is about trying to keep children in their homes rather than taking them into care and supporting their carers at the same time. Big project on learning disability transition, which has made a huge difference and avoided future costs and greater benefits for those people involved. Investment in Navigating Almond Bank House in terms of off-site provision for young people as well, but to keep them in the system and keep them linked very closely with the schools that they're attached to. And there's been investments in culture and leisure. I believe that these have made a significant difference to young people as we go forward and their life chances and their aspirations. And I think you, as a council and your predecessors have certainly supported me and my colleagues, some of which are here today and some of which are not, in delivering on these. Well, I've had the pleasure of working, this will be the third administration, and some of the projects that have caused a little bit of controversy and difficulty over these last 11 years, revenue and capital budgets, that's always fun. I think we recognise that. And you always manage to focus on improvement. And what I would say to Mike is keep plugging away with the A977, Mike. Your time will come. I'm fairly... But possibly I might need another pair of slippers before that occurs. Several local development plans and main issues reports and the impact that these have had in various localities across Perth and Kinross as we look for development land and commercial land as well. Do you remember the big debate about the incinerator? Yeah? Incinerator caused a lot of discussion in this chamber on more than one occasion. The City Hall, I'm glad to say that was over and done with very quickly. I think we only came to about 10 years of council meetings. And there's still issues there that we're still discussing in terms of harbour and the city deal. So these discussions were always interesting, sometimes fraught, and will continue. However, latterly there's one recurring theme that continues to stimulate more emotions in this chamber than anything else, and that's action partnerships. Yeah? And I think the Bible got it right in Genesis 1, verse 1, where it says, in the beginning, there were action partnerships. Now, you might not agree with that, but nonetheless, there we are. And although there are many political and party differences that separate you, on the big issues, on the big ticket issues that impact and affect people's lives in Perth and Kinross, you always coalesce. We've seen some disagreements today in terms of budget decisions on property and training and so on. But the big ticket issues in terms of investment in infrastructure, in schools, and local economy and employability, but most importantly for me, a focus on inequalities. And certainly at the revenue budget setting last week, there were differences there, but there were significant similarities between the two budget motions. And that's always been. I've been like that. But I can just mention two other things. One is fairness. During that budget process, the two motions, both motions put money into tackling inequalities and inequalities. And I think that is the right way to spend some of the hard cash and the hard money that's available for that type of thing. But tackling inequality was discussed today in the corporate plan. It's in the introduction, and it's certainly in one of the main sections there, and it threads its way through the community plan as well. But there's one other issue I'd like to mention before I finish, and that is evidence to success. Several years ago, we conducted in this council with our partners the largest survey the Community Planning Partnership has ever undertaken on health and well-being of our young people. And that involved parents of those children in 0 to 8 category as well. The consultation was not without its problems. All 41 councillors backed this pioneering approach after weathering significant media and political pressure. We were all over the papers and trying to develop an evidence-based approach on what's right and getting it right for young people and their parents going forward. The council then went on to invest £1.5 million for this, and it was a unanimous decision of that administration. So weathering that political storm, it was the right thing to do. And for those of you that have attended the briefing sessions, I think was there one this morning, Sheena? You will recognise the difference that that is making to people's lives that are in the system and not in the system because of that as we go forward. But the key thing there is that approach has been adopted nationally, and it's now at the heart of Scottish Government's approach to evidence-based practice and closing the poverty-related attainment gap. So many, many thanks to the councillors who weathered the storm and invested in that. But as you go forward, you have some difficult budgetary decisions to make. Within the changed legislative framework, it feels like the journey is one from control to one of influence, as we see different governance arrangements being put in place for health and social care, for city deals, and possibly education. However, regardless, I know that you will keep focused on the issues that really matter to people here. And to conclude, I bet you're glad to hear that, I started my career here as Executive Director, Education Children's Services, and finish it as Executive Director of Housing and Communities, with a whole bunch of other stuff fitted in along the way. I've enjoyed every minute of it. This is entirely due to the quality of the senior staff I've had the pleasure of working with, and particularly the lady at the back of me here, Bernadette, who's involved in my appointment and encouraged and supported me throughout my career. Also the support I've been given and still get from your good selves, because I don't retire to the 23rd of March, so I'm still here for the next couple of weeks. So I would still enjoy that support going forward. And your predecessors, obviously. So thank you for allowing me to share a wee bit of my journey with you, and I wish you all the very best in future. Thanks very much indeed.